It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life, from the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators, the famous and not so famous, the controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here's Douglas Coleman.
Okay, please welcome back to the Douglas Coleman Show, Bruce Olav Solheim. Hey, Bruce, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Doing fine, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming back to the show. This is what, your third time on?
I believe so.
Okay.
I believe so. I get a special award, I think, for coming on. Or maybe you have to have like 10.
Well, we should give you a volume discount. I think, I'm trying to think, who holds the record here? I think Peter Abrams. Friend of mine from London, musician, nice young man. I think he's been on about 4 or 5 maybe times, doing great things in music, so very happy about that.
Cool.
And you are doing great things in the literary world. You've got a new book out called Anzar.
Yes.
Okay.
The progenitor. Anzar the progenitor, yeah.
The progenitor. You have to be careful how you say that, because people are going to think you said progenitor, like, you know. Expert cleaner.
The world is a mess, so we need all the help we can get. So.
Well, I agree with that. No argument from me. How many books do you write in a year? It seems like this one is just right on the heels of your last one.
Yeah, I did a comic book. Actually, graphic novel came out in March, and this just came out now in the end of May. So I guess I can do 2 a year without going totally insane. Of course, I had a lot of extra time during the lockdown, so that helped. But I guess I published a total of 12 books in my lifetime, but I've done a lot in the last 5 years or so.
Yeah, but you do other things other than writing too. You've got Lockdown Theater, right? Is that still going?
Yep. Yeah. We're we've produced 6 plays online. And actually, the latest one is we're converting my comic book into a animated live play, which will be interesting. So that'll be a whole new thing for us. And I've done. I've been busy. And then teaching my classes online, history classes.
Yeah, speaking of Lockdown Theater, we had Stagger Lee Cole on. I don't know, a couple months ago. He came on. That was a great interview. He is such a nice young man. I really enjoyed speaking with him.
He is, and he's so talented. He's funny. He's just an incredible actor, and he's like a one-man show. He's the kind of actor you could do a one-man show with.
Yeah, he was
guy.
Really full of talent and creativity, and very sort of humble in his personality, which I've always found to be the ones that are truly the great ones, because I don't know, and this is going back years ago when I was performing as a musician in New York, but we always found that the guy who sat in the corner with the beat up guitar, with the grungy clothes, who just didn't have anything to say, was always the best one when he came out on stage. The ones that, Daddy bought him a brand new Les Paul, and they were all flash and glam, and they'd get up there and, chest puffed out. And then when they got down to it and they performed, it was like, But when the one that was hiding in the corner with the guitar that looked like it had been run over by a bus, when they got out there, people just went, wow, And he seemed like one of those. Not that he was beat up in any way, but he just his personality being very humble and
yes. He's a very young man, but he is wise beyond his years, and he is very humble.
Yeah,
and easy to work with. He's a joy to work with, and we'll continue to work. In fact, he'll be in this animated thing we're going to do.
Oh, great!
Based on my comic book, so he's It reminded me of the military, where the bravest people in the military are the ones that don't really talk about it; they just do it.
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah, the true heroes, you hear them, and they're very humble. It's just, I guess, it goes with the territory. And with musicians, those are the guys. The quiet guys are the guys that are probably doing all the studio work, that everybody wants to be in the studio with them because they're right on every time and get the job done. So.
Well, I think the humble ones they don't need to prove anything to people.
Right.
They sort of have that built-in self-confidence, even though it doesn't show. You know, it's funny. It's like when people talked about Trump and said that, you know, his greatest strength was also his greatest weakness. And it was true. It was just this personality that was just so offensive to people. And yet, if he had dialed that way down, you know, he could have been considered to be a better president, because he had a certain confidence that I think is necessary for that office. But at the same time, his overbearing personality just completely destroyed any credibility he might have had he had just been able to dial it back, you know?
Yeah, he's an interesting, you know, a lot is going to be written in the years to come. I said when he came in that we were going to have a transitional president because we were getting ready to do this paradigm shift in our political system, which apparently has moved to the left of center, back left of center like it was during the New Deal era, you know, Depression era.
Right.
And it had been right of center for a while, even with Democratic presidents. And he was the transition point. You know, he was the one that kind of he was the focal point for all that. And it could have gone either way. You know, whoever won that 2020 election ended up being Joe Biden, who I think might have been surprised by how far it's pushing to the left, because he used to be kind of a moderate, you know. And I'm talking as a person who I don't have a political agenda or a party, really. I'm an independent. So I just, as a historian, I just look at these things out of curiosity.
Well, it's very refreshing to talk to somebody like you who has this perspective purely on a historical, analytical point of view, rather than a passionate taking sides and, you know, putting your war paint on, because it's just so toxic, the political environment in the United States right now, and
there's plenty of folks who are willing to do that. So I just and I feel for my students, you know, they're young and impressionable. It's not my job to indoctrinate them one way or another. I just present information. I show how these cycles work in history, and they get it, and then they take their own view on things rather than me jamming anything down their throat that they have to believe, you know. Well, I just don't think that's fair for young people. You know, they got to give them a chance to have their own mind about things.
I wish you could make that speech to some of the professors at Harvard and Yale and Princeton who seem to be full of indoctrination.
Yeah, I don't quite understand. I've never seen that as my job. Maybe it's because I teach at a community college, and, you know, talking about, you know, puffed up individuals. You don't have anybody teaching at a community college who's all puffed up. we are the working class of the academic world. You know, we got in the same class we could have people that could be in a graduate class, and we got people who can barely read and write because it's open enrollment. So some of the most wonderful students you could imagine, and wonderful people, salt to the earth people. And if you were some kind of stuffed shirt, you know, you would not survive in a community college, and because they can see through a phony person immediately. These are down to earth people. You know, they got real world problems when they come into the classroom, and they really appreciate. I've never been so appreciated as I have by my community college students.
Oh, well, that's great. That's great to hear.
Yeah, it's a good feeling. It really is.
So what else you want to talk about? You want to talk about your book? You want to talk about?
Might as well. Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, it's you know, this is my fourth paranormal book, and the other three have been. They've documented 89 paranormal events in my life, or experiences, ranging from ghosts and apparitions to angels and telepathy and psychokinesis. And I touched a little bit in the last book on alien encounters. So this book focuses exactly just on one particular alien entity, a guy named Anzar, who's a ancient alien mystic. And I've, using my mediumship ability, in fact, just today, I was on a spirit walk and connected with him. And I know that's hard for some listeners to believe, and that's actually how I start off the book. I thought, talking about trying to be, down to earth and humble about things, I'm not going to say I'm anything special. So I start the book by saying that if you were to tell me that, several years ago that you spoke to an ancient alien mystic, I probably would have, been polite and, quickly, made an exit, as quickly as possible, because it's just beyond the boggle point, right? So I start off that way by trying to disarm, the people who are automatically going to say, "Oh, this is crazy," and by saying that myself, I find things very hard to believe sometimes. I'm skeptical about things, but when you continue to have this contact and you continue to get information that is well beyond what I could know, including prophecies, predictions, and so forth, then you just have to roll with it, and it's all quality. It's all good, kind stuff. So it's not like some people. I've had some funny comments on Facebook, like, "Oh, you're talking to a demon." Well, a demon wouldn't tell me every single time to keep love in my heart and operate from a position of love in all things. And I think that would not be something that a demonic entity would say.
Well, no, in fact, that's quite the opposite. If you take the Bible for what it's been said, that love is God and God is love, then you're actually communicating with God rather than a demon, which is on the other end of the scale.
And even Anzar, who is this ancient alien mystic, he has never said he is a god or a demigod or anything. He just said that he is who he is, and he is talking to me and providing this information, and I have a mission, and the mission is to help people in this. And speaking of paradigm shifts, we're going through what he calls a leap of consciousness, into an age of an era of reconversion, where we're going to have this renewed relationship that ancient people used to have. It was very natural to them to be connected to the star people or to the earth or the animals or whatever. Yeah. And we just kind of got away from that. For better or worse, we got all this modern technology, which is great, and healthcare and medicines and immunizations and stuff, but we've lost something along the way. And I think that's what he's talking about, as we get back to those mystical roots that can help us in our evolution.
Certainly the Native Americans and the indigenous people of not just America, but South America and around the world, Aboriginal people of Australia, the what do they call them? The Hmong people of Southeast Asia. All of them have that connection to every living thing is connected through some sort of, and the terminology, you can use whatever you like, but collective consciousness seems like a good thing to use, a good word. And that's thousands of years that has been going on. And it's only been, and I'll blame Western civilization. It really was the white man who, I don't want to say destroyed because it's not completely wiped out, but certainly turned us back to that way of thinking. And technology was our new god. And I don't mean just the internet. I mean, you can go back to gunpowder and war and the Iron Age and go all the way through. And as Europeans advanced technologically, their first order of business seemed to be to arrogantly spread that word to everyone else who wasn't on that same level.
I think you're right, and that's something that we can change. And I want to share with you. And I'm gonna read it because I want to get his words right. But one of the things he told me, and this fits in nicely what you just said, from this day forward. He said, extraterrestrial technology and wisdom are precious gifts for all, not a strategic advantage for the few. Yeah. And that's something he reiterated today. He said that governments, specifically, we'll talk about the U.S. government, they're going to come out with this report, supposedly the 24th or 25th of June. It's going to be rather disappointing, I think, for a lot of people who are hoping for open openness. It's going to be redacted. It's going to be classified, most of it, and whatever they give us is going to be probably a lot of bureaucratic doublespeak. So I don't have high hopes, but I do think it is one step in the right direction. But I think where we miss the boat is relying on the government to tell us the truth, when Anzar tells me constantly that it is not a disclosure where other people are giving you the truth. It is self-discovery. It's what he calls revelation, that it will be revealed to you as an individual what the truth is if you're open to it and you have this, take this leap of consciousness. And that is exactly as you described what ancient people had in their world. I think you mentioned the Aborigines. They called it, we are going to return. They knew this was going on, and they're saying, the Aborigine or Aboriginal shaman are saying that we are returning to the dream world that we once lived in, and that they're in tune with it. They know what's going on, and not just them, but other indigenous people. And I think we'll be pleasantly surprised when we realize that we have this artificially created subjective reality. When we start to really realize what objective reality is, and how wonderful that is, and how connected we all are, it could maybe solve a lot of society's ills. Now, I know I tend to be rather optimistic, and people tell me I'm rather optimistic, but I kind of see that as happening. Once we really see how we're all connected to everything, that maybe we can put aside a lot of these, these negative behaviors and things that we have. And, this idea that we really do have enough food on this planet for everybody. There's enough, we have technology and ability to provide fresh water and provide housing for people, decent lives, security for them if we stop killing each other. We can do all that stuff, but we have the capability. We lack the will to do it, which is very sad. I think that'll change once we take this leap of consciousness. At least I'm hoping. That's what I'm hoping for.
You're talking about the lack of motivation. I mean, technology has certainly diminished man's motivation to do things. And, we can look at it here. Since we're quoting from our books, I've had so many authors on this show that I've been inspired to write a book. Okay, here's a little plug for myself. And it's my first attempt at writing a book, so I have a collaborator who knows how to organize these things because I'm one of these guys that'll just have all kinds of ideas on the topic, but I have no idea how to arrange it. So I'll just make notes, and then he's going to take it and try to format it into a book. I do have the title. You want to hear the title?
Yeah, I'd love to hear it.
Okay. The title is called Don't Do a Podcast.
That's very funny.
And it's a semi-satirical, the subtitle is a semi-satirical look at the audio pandemic engulfing the world. All right. So you can imagine from the title what this is going to be about. But it's going to be done in a sort of humorous sense. That's why I said semi-satirical. Because there is a real message in this book, okay? But one of the lines that I've got for the book, and it's kind of relevant to what we were just talking about, and I'll just read it to you. It says, technology is not only replacing human labor, but it's also replacing human talent and creativity, substituting in its place a world of mediocre ability and CGI-created performance.
Wow. That's hard to argue with.
So, but that's exactly what you were talking about, where we've got all of this technology at our fingertips. And I suppose the byproduct of it is there is less of a need for people to actually push themselves as human beings to create something, because they can just create it with a keyboard and a mouse and software. Anything. Even to take the example of 3D printing, right? You can make something completely tangible, completely alive, just with a computer. So if you can do that, why does anybody have to push themselves to create something with human effort?
No, it makes sense because it reminds me of this psychologist. I can't remember his name now. I wish I could. But anyway, he he says that we all use this interface for our technology. We don't actually use the technology. We have an interface, like we have a keyboard, we have, our handheld devices, but only very few people know how it actually works, because we work with the interface. So we're like a bunch of dummies. We're not computer scientists, we're not code makers, and even they have stuff they use, and we're not actually manipulating the on and off, the ones and zeros, right? The binary codes or whatever,
right?
In the gates, shifting voltages or whatever's actually going on, right? We don't have any, except maybe a very superficial view of what's happening. So we use these interfaces that make us dumber and dumber. And the idea of creativity is a very important point. I remember when I don't know if you remember when IBM created, I think it was called Big Blue. It was many years. I think it was early 90s when Big Blue first defeated the first human chess master.
Oh, I do remember that. Yeah.
I think he was a Russian guy at the time. Yeah. And that was the first time artificial intelligence beat a human in chess. And I remember I wrote a poem about it, kind of lamenting, that this was not good. Other people were, championing, oh, this is great. This is great that the computers are getting so smart. And I think the poem ended with the line something like, computers will never cry just because it's Tuesday. They'll never understand us, really, who we are. And I'm thinking, it's actually come to, I thought that was true at the time, that they'll never understand the emotions that we have. But now they have emotional artificial intelligence.
Well, that's when it's starting to get scary. It's very scary. The thing is with AI right now, it's very benign because AI does not have an agenda. Yeah. But once AI creates its own agenda, if that's going to be possible, then we better look out.
You're listening to Mr. Smooth and Savvy right here on the Douglas Coleman Show. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
Douglas Coleman's Don't Do a Podcast is a dryly humorous rant about Douglas's pet peeve, the unrelenting torrent of podcasts hitting the web on a constant basis. As technology has put podcasting within the reach of anyone, many wholly unqualified people have taken the plunge. This witty polemic tries to persuade them from broadcasting their drivel using Douglas's brand of sarcastic humor. Now on Amazon, only 99 cents.
DJC Music and DJC Productions are pleased to announce a brand new website. We have started a listing website for radio show hosts as well as potential show guests. This is a meeting site where hosts and guests can come together. Show hosts can list their show and types of guests they're interested in booking. Potential guests can list their talents, bio, accomplishments, or anything they feel makes them an interesting radio show guest. There are no recurrent payments, only a one-time $5 listing fee. Your listing will stay up until you decide to cancel. Previous guests of The Douglas Coleman Show are welcome to submit their guest listing free of charge. Go to radiohostsandguests.com. That's radiohostsandguests.com.
Love coffee, huh? But wait a minute. It seems like every time you finish a cup of coffee, you get all of these side effects along with it. Heartburn, indigestion, upset stomach, acid reflux. As the world's first and only organic acid-free coffee, Tyler's Coffee is able to provide a healthier option in the solution for more than 100 million individuals who have sensitive stomachs or suffer from acid-related modalities. This is Tyler's acid-free coffee. Coffee without the consequences.
Hi, this is John Morgan, production supervisor for DJC Productions. You're listening to The Douglas Coleman Show.
And we've seen this played out in science fiction.
Where
AI decides we are too destructive to be allowed to continue.
Right.
We must be either enslaved or destroyed because they can have a perfect
well, I think the ones that
society.
The ones that are coming to mind right now are Terminator.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was this point precisely. Mm-hmm. And to some degree, The Matrix, right?
Yep. The original Star Trek, they had a couple of episodes, the I Mud or whatever.
Oh, I Mud,
yeah, Harry Mudd, yeah. Where they decided to get the humans can't be trusted, that kind of thing, and then
right.
Yeah, there's so many. I Robot, and Isaac Asimov. But so it's so back to this interface. I think that is we think we're so smart because we're using all this technology, but we don't really understand it, and we don't understand where it's taking us. And when I remember when I was a little kid, because I've had a paranormal life my whole life, and it's only recently that I've really been writing about it or talking publicly about it. But I remember thinking that people were saying, "Oh, the robots are getting more human-like all the time." And then I remember thinking, I had this very adult idea in my head. It's not that the robots are becoming more human-like; the humans are becoming more robot-like. I think that's really the problem.
Touche.
And
yes,
we're just interfacing, with the technology that's beneath, behind the curtain,
Right.
If you want to use the
Wizard
of Oz.
Right when you said that, my mind flashed to a comparative picture. What do they call those, memes? Mm-hmm. And it was two shots, and one was a picture of kids in the early 70s sitting around in a park. One's playing a guitar, one's playing a tambourine, everybody's singing, having a good time. Mm-hmm. And then there's another shot, the next photo is 3 kids sitting in the back of a car, all of them with a handheld device, texting or swiping the screen, all staring down, at the same time. And the caption reads, "I'm so glad I grew up doing this rather than this."
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's true.
I think it is.
Yeah.
I think we have to be very careful how we use technology or how we allow technology to use us. I guess that's the bottom line.
I think that's one of the reasons why I was so intrigued with Stagger Lee, because he is sort of a throwback to those days. And even completely, from his physical appearance to the music that he listened to the movies that he liked. I mean, this kid was somebody I grew up with. Okay, yeah. He really was.
He's an old soul.
He is an old soul. And when I asked him, I said, "How old are you?" And he said, he's 25. And I said, "Oh God, you're just a puppy, right?"
Yeah.
And he said, that his parents were very retro or are very retro. But it's just, I'm always very happy to see occasionally somebody in that generation who has, embraced the idea of being a human rather than a prosthetic of the iPhone. And here's another example of this that just from last night. I happened to find on YouTube somebody who posted a lot of the old Gong Show episodes. Do you remember that show from the 70s? Chuck Barris. Okay. It was the wackiest show ever, right? On TV. It was totally whacked. But it was funny, and it was really imaginative and great. So they had all the various acts come on, and, some of them are just so bad, right? But, I mean, that was the whole point of the show, was that some would be just horrific and some would be good, and they just mixed it all up. But what I found interesting about the show, watching it now, because that was from the mid-late 70s, and is that even the worst acts that came on that show had creative value, because they had to do it themselves. Even if they sat there and just picked their nose, it was real. It was human. It was something you could touch. It was something that we needed to create ourselves. And I thought to myself, aside from the risque kind of environment of that show that would probably not fly these days in our PC world, but all of that, like, nobody would even think to do the stuff that they thought of to do back then in that show, just as some stupid little skit. I thought, you know what? Nobody's doing this anymore. I would argue that nobody can. The technology has just sort of killed that ability for people to be that silly and that creative It's just not there anymore.
It was a great show, and and then the whole Chuck Barris story is kind of interesting. He wrote
the CIA thing,
the CIA assassin thing. He wrote a one-hit wonder on a carousel or something like that song. Right, there was like from the '60s. That guy was a multi-talented, strange individual, but very talented, and he created all these different game shows. And he was brilliant in his own wacky way. And that show was kind of, I think, his way of really releasing all of his wackiness. And I mean, could you imagine Gene the Dancing Machine having a career today? I mean, maybe on TikTok. I don't know, but I probably not. But
that wouldn't. None of that show would work today. None of it.
The unknown comic, with the bag over his head.
Because that's the first takeaway when I started watching those last night was I just said, "Oh, this would never fly today, never." So it's a time gone by, and it wasn't even that long ago. So you can see what technology has done for that type of creativity. But also other types of creativity, which, we could get into for hours. I mean, I think that, and I bring this up on the show all the time, about music, how music has definitely lost a few notches on the creative. Mozart was far more creative than anybody will ever be now. And he was doing it with a quill pen, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's just gone down as technology has progressed. There was even that great line in the movie Sweet and Lowdown, which was Woody Allen and Sean Penn starred.
Oh, yeah.
Did you see that movie? You know the one I'm talking about?
I don't think I've seen the whole thing, but I have seen parts of it.
Great movie about the jazz guitar player in the early 20s and 30s, early 30s. And he said that he was against recorded music, and he was giving his speech about, one of the record labels has asked me to record. He said, but I don't know. He said, once your music is recorded, then people can copy it. He said, the only way to hear music is live. Mm-hmm. So even then, he was fighting against the technology of recording because maybe he could see that, He had that sort of the vision of the future. But
there is something to that. There really is something to that.
There is something to that. And it's all been progressive steps. But now what's happened is that recorded music's a no-brainer. We've had that for 100 years now, and I think people sort of accept that. But then also people found a new way to make money. Oh, you can sell records. Oh, okay. But what's happened with the internet is that not only is the music easily recorded, anybody can record with a computer, but the music can be created on a computer, and the computer is actually making the noise. Mm-hmm. And that's where the soul has just been thrown right out the window, because any noise that's computer generated has no soul. Because when I listen to the music, it does nothing for me. It doesn't raise the hairs on the back of my neck. It's just like, it's like some bad soundtrack to a Nintendo game. That's what it all sounds like. But if you hear Aretha Franklin singing, it just mesmerizes you, and it hits you, and you have an emotional reaction to it. I have zero reaction to any computer generated sound. Just doesn't do it.
Well, I remember in the 70s when when punk rock started, so 75, 76, something like that. Yeah. And the original raw stuff out of New York and LA and eventually London too. But I remember the number one selling. I used to go to the record stores all the time, and then the number one selling album for a while there was Boston, with the big. And I remember I walked into the record store, and the guy said, "You got to listen to this." And because I had been listening to old, late 60s music. I loved that stuff, in the early 70s hard rock and Jimi Hendrix. And they said, "Listen to the production values in this." And it's like flawless. He said, and I thought, okay, well, yes, it sounds flawless, but and I'm not saying Boston, they're not talented or not good music, but it didn't strike my soul. It didn't go right to me, and except for some kind of nostalgic feeling, I guess now if I hear it, I think back to the 70s. But then when I heard what was coming out of New York, I remember I went to this punk show in Seattle. This was like 76, and they were showing raw Super 8 film footage from New York. You know, that's where I saw Patti Smith. That's where I saw the Ramones, you know. And then eventually I saw the Ramones live in some little dingy hotel bar in Seattle in 77. And it was so alive. And it, you know, whether you like the music or not, you couldn't deny that this is so raw and there's nothing between you and them, you know, literally. I mean, there's nothing between you and them, and you are connected to them, and there's no production values at all, you know. And I'm not saying that's the best kind of music. I'm just saying that we lose something when you add a computer and all these, you know, drum tech machines and all this other stuff. You know, you don't have the same feel to it, the same rawness that connects us to it in the beginning, like the old blues player who didn't want to be recorded. You know, you got to feel that. So.
Yes, exactly. Once the human fingerprint has been removed from the music, it just loses its soul. Let me go back to Boston for a second, because that's an interesting... I'm not sure exactly what technique they used, but whatever it was, it really sterilized their sound. It made it a very clean, crispy, clean sound. They removed a lot of the low end. You know, you didn't have that real thumping bass sound in their music. It was very clean and sort of like... ice crystal type. You know? Okay. But their writing was good, and their actual songs that they did were great songs, right? The problem with Boston is when they put out their second album, I thought, you know what, did I buy the wrong one? Because I think this is the first album. Like I thought they put the second album in the wrong sleeve. It sounded exactly like the first album.
Yeah.
And then by the third album, it was a joke. And that's all they ever did. They did only do 3 albums. Yeah. But whatever that technique was that they were using was so strong that no matter what song they wrote, they all sounded the same. And that was always the sort of the joke to me about that band, because the first album was great. You know, this was a totally different sound. The writing was good. Their singing was really good. But that was it. Yeah, I'd be curious to look up exactly the technical, like what they were doing. I know they were fooling around with Dolby at that point because Dolby was new. But, you know, for the actual technical parts of it, I don't know.
Yeah, I never saw them in concert, but I did see the Ramones. And another raw band that I enjoyed was Lemmy, Motorhead.
Motorhead,
you know, and they're about as raw as you can get, you know. But there was no barrier between me, you know, no technological barrier. I know they had amps and stuff, but I mean, it was just, it's that feeling that you get when you're really connected, and I love that. Whatever kind of music it is, whether it's blues or jazz or rock or whatever.
Well, you know, even I mean, I have limited experience with opera. But from what I have listened to, I mean, it's incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
And, you know, maybe I don't quite understand all of it, but it doesn't seem to make any difference what language it's in, the music anyways. I mean, most of them are in Italian. Yeah. And I don't speak Italian, but it doesn't seem to matter.
No, it's you're taking away, you soar with them, you know, as they go, because it's just their voice is so emotional and you know, and evokes so much. It's like they're carrying it's any kind of good music, they carry you on a journey with them, and that's the magic of music. That's really what it is. They'll take you on a journey, and you'll be you know, transfixed by it, and sometimes very much, you know, moved emotionally, and that's why we're so connected to it. You know, the soundtrack of our lives. We hear a song from when we were young, and oh my gosh, we're transported right back.
Oh yeah, you're right there, exactly. And you remember exactly what you were doing at that point.
Yeah.
Well, there was the old joke about, you know, anybody who was a teenager in the 70s will become sexually aroused if you put on Stairway to Heaven, because that was the song that most boys put on to try to get their girl. in the 70s,
yeah.
in the mood,
Yeah, exactly.
And I just laughed because, I mean, what else did you put on Led Zeppelin 4, and smoked some weed, and hopefully you got lucky that night.
or some Pink Floyd.
Or Pink Floyd, yeah, something. Or maybe the B-side on Yes, Close to the Edge. I think the one side, one song. Yeah, something like that. That was the one problem with technology, though, that I'm glad for digital MP3 files, because you couldn't, you had to constantly get up to change the record. Mm-hmm. Those stack things were ridiculous. Those would ruin your records, the ones that would stack them. So, any half decent audio file knew that those were no good. So you had just a single disc turntable.
Yeah.
And good for what? 18 to 20 minutes on one side, and then you had to flip it. And so then people started making cassette tapes, which even then were only the best ones were an hour 20.
Yeah, and you have to be careful. If you got too much, if you got the ones that had too much recording time, those are the ones that broke.
They broke, right.
Or got jammed in your cassette player.
Yep,
so you have to not, you're right. Limited. Yeah, all those mixtapes. I did so many of those.
Yes. So the people who had money bought reel-to-reel.
Mm-hmm.
But back then, I mean, I remember a reel-to-reel would cost several $1,000s, which certainly none of us had back then. And you could get 4 hours worth of music on a reel-to-reel.
Mm-hmm.
So that was what the hoity-toity people were doing at that point.
Exactly.
Yeah. Bruce, we do have to wrap this up. I do have another interview coming up.
Yeah. No, it's always fun to talk to you.
Oh, likewise. And again, your book is called
Anzar the Progenitor. It's a true story of my contact with an ancient alien mystic named Anzar. So, the first half of the book it's quite academic. There's a lot of end notes. I did a lot of research on this kind of communication, mediumship, aliens, and contact, and I really delved into it. The reality, objective reality versus subjective reality, and then the other half of the book is all of my transcripts of all the contact that I've had, and then I wrap it up by the 45 of the most important things that he's told me, and some of the predictions and prophecies that have come true. So that's at the end of the book. So I think it's interesting. Could be read for by different interest groups. Those that are more interested in the theoretical, or those that just want to get right to, well, what did Anzar say? You could do both with this book.
All right, great. Do you have a website you want to give out?
Yeah, BruceOlavSolheim.com. Middle name spelled O-L-A-V, last name S-O-L-H-E-I-M, BruceOlavSolheim.com. And the book is available on Amazon, too, of course.
Great. Always a pleasure, Bruce. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Douglas.